All right, welcome to the deep dive, everybody. We're diving into something you, our amazing listeners, brought to
Yeah,
us.
this is gonna be fun.
It's this wild idea that The Simpsons, the show, has somehow been predicting real world events.
Right. I mean, how crazy is that?
We've gotten tons of your messages about it, articles, fan theories, the whole nine yards. So today, let's unpack this. Are we really looking into the future through Springfield? Are these just wild coincidences, or is there something else entirely going on here?
Yeah, and you guys said to some really great stuff. We've got examples of specific things fans think the show predicted, and then some really interesting analysis of satire, probability, how likely these things are to happen, and even some psychology stuff about how our brains work.
Okay, so that psychology bit, that's interesting to me.
Look,
But first, let's address the elephant in the room here. Is it that the writers of The Simpsons are just that good? Like, are they secretly time travelers, or are they just super smart and picking up on trends that eventually play out in the real world?
or, I mean, think about it. The show's been running for over 30 years.
A long time.
With that much content, it's kind of bound to happen, right? Statistically speaking, some things are going to line up just by chance. So where do we even begin to figure out what's going on?
Right. So many episodes, so many jokes, so many storylines. Pure chance has to be part of it. But then there's the other side, and I think that's where the cultural commentary argument comes in.
Absolutely. And that's what's so fascinating about The Simpsons. It's always been really sharp and witty, like holding a mirror up to society and exaggerating our trends and habits.
Right, taking things to the extreme.
Exactly. And, well, sometimes those extremes end up becoming our reality. Think about it. They're pushing these trends to their most absurd conclusions, so it shouldn't be too shocking when some of that absurdity seeps into real life as those trends evolve.
Yeah. It's like they're not predicting the future. They're just really good at seeing where things are headed and then making fun of it.
Exactly. Informed satire, not like some crystal ball stuff.
Okay, that makes sense. So some of it's smart satire, some of it's probably just chance. But then you have these specific examples that everyone points to, like let's talk about the Donald Trump presidency being predicted in Bart to the Future. That episode is brought up all the time.
Right, and that's a big one. But, a lot of the sources we looked at emphasize that episode was really intended as a satire on celebrity culture at the time.
So not necessarily saying, hey, Trump's going to be president one day, but more like, wouldn't it be crazy if this kind of celebrity with no political experience ended up in charge?
Yeah, totally. It was poking fun at the whole idea of fame and power, not making a specific prediction about Trump himself. And, that was back in 2000.
I mean, if they had actually predicted it, that would be truly wild.
Right. Mind-blowing.
Okay, so what about another classic example, the smartwatch in Lisa's Wedding from way back in 1995? That one always blows my mind.
Yeah, that's a really interesting one because it definitely predates the Apple Watch and all that. But think about what was happening in tech back then.
I mean, computers were getting smaller, cell phones were becoming a thing.
Exactly. The desire for portable integrated technology was already there. So while the specific form factor of the smartwatch in the episode might not have been spot on, the idea itself wasn't that far-fetched. The show was picking up on those early developments and extrapolating them.
Right. It's like they saw the writing on the wall, so to speak. Okay, then you have the Disney-Fox merger being shown in that 1998 episode. How do we make sense of that one?
Well, it seems super specific, right? But again, even back then, there were whispers and rumors about media consolidation.
Right, big companies merging.
Exactly. The show was playing with those existing industry dynamics. And I mean, it wasn't just The Simpsons that picked up on this. If you look at movies and TV from that era, there's a lot of commentary about big corporations and media empires.
So once again, more like reading the room and then taking it to a comedic extreme.
Exactly. Okay, what about the FIFA corruption scandal? That's another one people love to bring up, the episode from 2014.
I remember that one. They really went all in on the shady dealings.
They did. But remember, that episode aired when there were already a ton of concerns and allegations swirling around FIFA. It wasn't some out-of-the-blue prediction. It was a reflection of what was already being talked about and investigated.
So like ripped from the headlines, but with a Simpsons twist.
Precisely. Okay, but now let's talk about a more controversial one. The pandemic connection to margin chains from, what was it, 1993?
Yeah, and then there was that whole thing about Murder Hornet.
Right. Now that one, I think even our sources were a little hesitant about. Those parallels feel a lot more loose and less specific than some of the other examples we've talked about.
Yeah, it's easy to see how viewers might draw those connections after the fact, but it's a bit of a stretch to say the show predicted a global pandemic or a specific type of insect.
I mean, The Simpsons has had episodes about all sorts of crazy things, but not everything lines up perfectly with reality.
Right, it's like playing connect the dots. If you look hard enough, you can find patterns, even if they aren't really there.
Exactly, and that's what's so interesting about this whole phenomenon. It's less about The Simpsons having some magical ability to see the future and more about a bunch of different things coming together.
Yeah, like we've got this show that's been running for ages with tons of episodes covering all sorts of topics. They're really good at satire and picking up on cultural trends. And then you add in our human tendency to look for patterns and try to make sense of the world.
Exactly. It's a recipe for these uncanny coincidences.
And it's not just limited to The Simpsons either, right? I mean, think about any long-running show, book series, or even video game.
Oh, yeah.
With enough content, you're bound to find moments that seem to echo real-life events.
Right, and the longer the show goes on, the more likely it is that something they've done will eventually line up with something that happens in the real world. It's almost like a law of probability.
So what can we take away from all of this?
I think, for me, the takeaway is that The Simpsons is a brilliant show, super sharp and funny, and they've definitely hit on some real-world events in a way that's, well, kind of eerie. But I don't think they have a crystal ball.
Yeah, no time travel happening in Springfield.
It's more about them being great observers of culture and society, and then, of course, our own brains trying to make connections and find meaning in all of it.
Right. And I think that's a perfect place to leave our listeners with a question to ponder. Think about other long-running works of fiction you love. Have you noticed any similar predictions or moments that seem to mirror real life? And if so, what does that tell you about how we interact with the media we consume and how we think about the future?
Yeah, that's a great question. We'd love to hear your thoughts. Hit us up on social media and let us know what you come up with.
Until next time, happy deep diving, everyone.
See ya.